Hello, I'm Greg Levine. Welcome to the Party Line. This is October the 7th, 2011, and you might notice, first of all, that there's not really any text below this video today. I had taken to writing big posts to augment the videos. There's several reasons for this. First and foremost, some of the things I want to say today, tone is really important, and I was afraid it could be misconstrued if you say just looked at the written word without listening to the video. I'll get to that more in a second. Also, I took a lot of notes for this, and they were mostly destroyed in a rainstorm. I'll explain that as well. So, I want to talk a little bit about a rally I attended last Saturday. No, not that one. And no, not that one either. You see, that's part of the problem right here. We'll start off with that. I went to a Coalition Against Nukes rally, C.A.N, that was put together by groups who, in general, were protesting nuclear power in the United States. In specific, were looking to shut down Indian Point, 25 miles north of where I'm sitting right now. It was on the Hudson River, at about 55th Street in the afternoon, early afternoon on Saturday. That would have been, I guess, the 1st of October. This event came at the exact same time as a big day for Occupy Wall Street. That this event came on the same day as New York Slut Walk probably didn't help their cause. And that the event site, because of permitting issues, was a good 20-minute walk from the nearest subway, probably didn't help either. So the first thing I will note is that it was not so well attended. I mean, there were probably 200, maybe 250 people there at its peak, but that's at its peak. And I have to take issue with that. But before I take issue with a couple of things, I want to say right off, these things are hard to do, and I understand that. And I want to express admiration and appreciation for the people who not only put together this rally here in New York City, but rallies across the country on October 1st to try and call attention to the issues concerning nuclear power and safety, the safety of nuclear power generation in the United States, especially in an era, I'm not going to call it post-Fukushima. I keep getting attacked for that. What I mean by that is after the day everything started to go wrong, because I understand Fukushima is an ongoing event. I say that all the time. The crisis continues to metastasize. So in this era, since the start of Fukushima, it is important that we all work overtime to call attention to the problems inherent in using fission to boil water, as they say. Now, that said, this was a rally like you probably have attended if you're my age many times in your life, or if you're younger, perhaps have seen in the odd movie or two. It was people standing up and talking, interspersed with people playing guitars and reading poems. There were no drum circles, no. But let me set the scene for you. So you walk 20 minutes from the subway to Hudson River, and it's a very beautiful sight, and it's appropriate too because it's down the river from Indian Point. But as I pointed out, it's not easily accessible. It's not something you're going to stumble across. You have to go there. So it's not going to attract people who just happen to be passing by, because very few people are just passing by that point on a Saturday afternoon. And of course, as I noted also, it was in conflict with lots of other bigger, better organized events, longer organized, better publicized is key, events. That said, okay, the weather all day was threatening. It had rained the night before. It was supposed to rain all day Saturday. When I got there, it wasn't so bad. And we we stood there in the breeze and the cool and the threatening skies, and we listened to some speeches, and these are speeches by good people, people who've worked long and hard in this movement, like Brent Blackwelder, Carl Grossman. A very good presentation by Kevin Camps of Beyond Nuclear, a site that I highly recommend. The headliner of the day was Helen Caldicott and Harvey Wasserman, who I chatted with on Firedog Lake earlier this year to talk about some of the issues in light of Fukushima and his advocacy for no more nukes. Okay, so we have this lineup of people. John Hall, former congressman from upstate, also spoke. But see, John Hall also played guitar, and he wasn't the only one. There was someone else, he'll remain nameless, who also played guitar. So you get some speeches, get John Hall sort of playing guitar and talking, and then you get another speech, and then a guy comes up and plays guitar, and by this point, what was like an okay day is turning pretty darn miserable. And we're not yet at Helen Caldicott, who, if you've ever seen her, is a fiery speaker, an impassioned voice, a long-time advocate, a long-time activist in this field, founder of Physicians for Social Responsibility. Really someone you want to hear, someone you want to give time to. But because we had to sit through guitars and poems, by the time we get to Helen Caldicott, it's raining. And it's not just like raining, it's really starting to pour. And Helen Caldicott, God bless her, basically says politely, you've heard everything I had to say, and then she just sort of speaks from the heart a little about why don't we wake up to the problem here. But you know, because she had a stack of books in her hands, that she had a lot of things she wanted to say, and whether those were actually covered by the people who came up before or not, it really should have been coordinated. It should have been coordinated that when the weather got bad, you cut out some of the stuff in between so that she could speak earlier. It should have been coordinated so that you didn't steal her thunder. And then, after her, as a sort of grace note, Harvey Wasserman got up, but at that point, the weather was so foul that he basically just gave a good yay team, thank you very much, and then everyone ran to huddle under the small tent that was provided for the electronic equipment. I shook a few hands, said thank you to a few people, and got the hell out of there. I was soaked to the bone, soaked through, my pockets were wet, and thus my notes here were sort of all blurred. What I can still make out, and what I remember, and now I want to talk about some of the good stuff, is a little bit of the information, not good in that the information is horrible, but that there was information conveyed here, and information people should take to heart. I thought some of the most touching stuff, of course, came from a pair of Japanese women with Japanese American now living in New York, but with relatives in the affected areas in Japan. And the thing that struck me most was one that talked about an organization that's been formed called Save Fukushima by Eating. And this is actually started by the governor of the prefecture, and it's an attempt to get people to feel patriotic about eating the tainted food, the radiated food, as a way of encouraging growth again, rebuilding of the prefecture's economy. It's a frightening scenario. It's a scenario that almost sounded too icky to be true, so I checked, and yeah, that's really happening. And a source of mine in Japan went further to say that the food from the area is being used in student cafeteria lunches across Japan as a way also of trying to funnel some money into the local economy. But of course, you're feeding contaminated radioactive food to children. And it's really disgusting. It goes hand in hand with some articles that came out over the past week or two about how TEPCO, the Tokyo Electric Power Company that ran the Fukushima Daiichi plant, stacked public forums with pro-nuclear either questioners or provocateurs, depending on what kind of a meeting it was. Also not really surprising, but really awful, and also not something isolated, I don't think. to Japan. We heard stories about both the U.S. and British nuclear industries in the immediate aftermath of the earthquakes in March of organizing a sort of quiet media blitz, a sort of vox populi manufactured to support continued use of nuclear power in those countries. So that really stuck out to me. Also noteworthy was Kevin Kamps, who gave a long discussion about the dry casks at the Palisades plant in Michigan. I've written about the Palisades plant recently because they had other problems. Dry casks have been in the news because it's a preferable alternative, theoretically, to liquid storage, wet storage as they call it, fuel pools. But they themselves are not foolproof, and he told some stories about casks on the beach in Palisades, which is in Michigan, that sort of migrated down the beach a little bit, sort of half-tipped over. Stories like that, very disturbing. But back to the general picture, which is, okay, so there are important things to tell here, and the question is now, how are we going to get these stories communicated to a broader public? Because I don't think, Googling for information about the rallies that were held across the country on October 1st, very sad process. The press people for the rally sent me a few links. There are a couple of good stories, but there aren't many out there as best I can tell. And the rally did itself no favors by not organizing. It did itself no favors by insisting on the folk music. It honestly also did itself no favors by inviting Gary Null to speak, who went on at length, fiery as he is, about solar flares that are coming and are going to overload our grid. May or may not be true. I haven't read a lot about that. But honestly, you have a limited amount of time. You're only going to be there for one day. That actually does require you to narrow the scope and focus the issue. The difference between this and Occupy Wall Street, for instance, is that Occupy Wall Street is an occupation. They have the luxury of building over time. They don't have to have a narrow set of demands because it's a different kind of protest. But this is something that was scheduled for one day, and it needed a focal point, and it didn't have a focal point. And in general, we need a point of leverage. It's not the 60s, it's not the 70s, as Herm Cain will tell you, it's not even 2009 anymore. And we need to think about how to use our resources so that we can leverage change. I've talked before about trying to cut off some of the federal subsidies to nuclear power. Perhaps we can organize around that. I've talked a little bit in the past about a state angle to organize around closing of specific plants by using state regulations that can supersede or interrupt federal efforts. I'll talk more about that soon, I think. And there are probably other ideas out there. I mean, the plant-by-plant model has actually worked for some people who are organizing against old coal-fired plants. So there's some examples there. So a focal point, a point of leverage. Think in modern political terms. A simple rally, a one-day march, a few speeches, all nice. We got to do something different in this post-event Fukushima, ongoing catastrophe era where the forces behind the United States government are pushing to actually expand nuclear power. All right? And all of that said with love and gratitude to the people who organized the rally. But we got a lot of work ahead of us, so let's think about this. And oh, just one more thing. I also, in the last week, was able to participate in an interview with Nuclear Regulatory Commission Chair, Nuclear Regulatory Commission Chair Gregory Jaczko. And I got a lot to say about that, and I'm going to say it soon. But I have to hold back on that for now. So watch this space. And and just one more thing. This video was made on a Mac. And if I had to make it on a PC, if I hadn't run into a Mac SE 20-something years ago, I don't know if I even ever would have been able to type enough to be a blogger. And that's the party line.